Hi guys, welcome to the third episode of this weekly series which looks at how to most effectively play as heroes and villains on Galactic Assault on Star Wars Battlefront 2. If you have enjoyed the series so far, please leave me a like and subscribe to my channel. This week we will be looking at Chewie, one of my favourite heroes in the Star Wars universe and one who is much better balanced, perhaps not on heroes versus villains, but certainly on Galactic Assault. He is not many people's first choice hero, but in lots of situations he can be extremely fun and effective to play as. Chewie has access to 3 abilities, all of which have vastly different uses. Upon activation, Furious Bowcaster sees Chewie throw his arms in the air whilst roaring, making a noise all true Star Wars fans will understand. This allows Chewie to fire his bowcaster more quickly and continuously for the duration of this ability. Chewie's second ability is a shock grenade, which when thrown explodes upon impact. It does no damage to enemies, but rather it paralyses them for a set period of time, making them easy targets for Chewie or any of his allies. Finally, Chewie can also use Charge Slam, which when triggered causes Chewie to run forward quickly. Once you click right trigger, Chewie slams the ground directly in front of him, damaging enemies whilst also hurling them to the ground at the same time. As you've probably guessed, Chewie's primary weapon is his bowcaster, and this can be fired in 2 different ways. If you fire from the hip without aiming, the bowcaster will release a number of shots in a horizontal spread. Alternatively, if you hold down aim whilst firing, the bowcaster fires all its shots in a smaller cluster. Chewie does have a number of significant strengths and weaknesses that need to be considered by any player expecting to utilise him effectively on the battlefront. Before I discuss this, just a quick note on Wookiee warriors. Lots of players complained that before their recent nerf, they were so powerful on Galactic Assault that they were actually a much better option than Chewie himself. I'm not entirely sure how much effect the recent nerf has had on Wookiee warriors, but either way, I don't want to spend too much time discussing this. I want to consider Chewie on his own merits, rather than judging him relatively to another unit. Chewie is unbelievably powerful against villains, as I'm sure anyone who has played more than a handful of HVV games will know. Let me explain this for players who don't play this game mode. Chewie's shock grenade is very easy to aim, and unlike Palpatine's electrocute, it does not have a long and ultimately risky animation. This means Chewie can easily immobilise enemy villains. If he then follows this up by activating Furious Bowcaster before releasing a barrage of shots, he can finish off most villains in seconds. If he immobilises more than one hero, he could also use his Charge Slam to do significant damage to all enemy villains. Chewie is so powerful against villains that I have literally seen Palpatines, Mauls and Vaders flee at the sight of him, which as a big Star Wars fan is kinda weird to see, but completely understandable, as Chewie is by far the most threatening hero to other villains. Chewie's second strength concerns his primary weapon, the bowcaster, and its related ability, Furious Bowcaster. Personally, I find this weapon incredibly satisfying to use, but more importantly, very easy to aim. 2 shots dispatches most enemy troopers, and close range shots will often be a one-hit kill. I'm really not surprised Han Solo was so keen to have a go of this weapon in The Force Awakens. And this is all without considering the buff that Furious Bowcaster gives Chewie's primary weapon. Furious Bowcaster makes an already great weapon even more powerful by firing shots quicker. A good Chewie player is capable of using this ability to take out large groups of enemies really quickly. Chewie's gun is without doubt one of my favourites on the game. The next strength is only a small one, but it's still worth mentioning. Chewie only costs 6,000 points on every map in the game. This is because he is the only playable character to appear in all 3 Star Wars eras. This makes him the most readily available hero in the game, and this combined with the fact he is relatively unpopular amongst players means Chewie is almost always an option for you. Newer players may find themselves using Chewie a lot, at least at first. Unfortunately, Chewie does have some pretty significant weaknesses which can and will get him killed in many situations. First of all, Whilst Chewie's base health is acceptable at 650, he can regenerate hardly any. I think he can regenerate around 100 health points, and so this means that if someone reduces Chewie's health to say 400, he can only then regain his health to the level of 500. This makes him extremely fragile, when really you would expect Chewie to be pretty tanky. This is even more of a problem because he is such a big target, probably the biggest in the whole game. As such, cover is hard to come by when playing as Chewie, and you will often find yourself losing health despite being in what you thought were safe places. What makes this even worse is Chewie is incredibly slow. Even his roll is a little laborious, and as such, if Chewie does find himself overwhelmed, it can be very difficult to escape. And even if you do manage to, you will most certainly have lost a significant chunk of his health. He can use his charge slam to speed him up a little, but personally I find this to be a little buggy and difficult to direct. Chewie's next weakness is very much tied to what I've just spoken about. Chewie's bowcaster, whilst being incredibly powerful, loses much of its effectiveness at long range. It has no scope, and it deals less damage from distance. I still maintain that this gun is very effective, however Chewie has to be close to enemies all the time if he is to register kills and, more importantly, affect games. His poor health regeneration, general slowness and his large size, combined with the need to be close to enemies, are not always a good mix, as I'm sure you can imagine. Another weakness of Chewie's is his charge slam ability. At least this is a weakness in Galactic Assault. I just don't see a reason to ever use this. If you do come up against a group of enemies, using this is virtually suicide. I doubt you'd even make it halfway to your enemies before you were blasted down. Also, this is often not a one-hit kill, meaning when you have completed the slam, you are exposed straight away to blaster fire. The only good thing about this ability is it looks pretty cool, but from a practical point of view, I think it's pretty much useless on Galactic Assault. The first thing I would say when playing as Chewie is you must hunt down enemy villains. Good Palpatine, Maul or Bosk players in particular can be a regular annoyance and can dramatically swing battles in your opposition's favour. As such, as Chewie, it is your primary responsibility to catch these players out by surprising them with Chewie's shot grenade. The best thing to do is to wait until villains are as close to you as possible before throwing a shot grenade at their feet. The reason that this is better than throwing your grenade at distant villains is because the closer the villain is to you when shocked, the more effective your bowcaster will be, considering its effectiveness at close range of course. Once your enemy is shocked, you should then activate Furious Bowcaster and fire at their head repeatedly. And even if somehow this alone doesn't take them out, in most cases your teammate should help you dispose of your target. Remember, enemies will often not know you are Chewie until it is too late. An overconfident Palpatine player may see your hero icon on the minimap and think you are an easy kill, perhaps a Yoda or a Luke. Use this element of surprise to your advantage and you can really get one over on skilled Palpatine players who have probably been terrorising you throughout your time on Battlefront. By doing this, you should also actively swing the battle back in your team's favour, and believe me, you will take a great sense of satisfaction from doing this. Remember, if you are not killing villains as Chewie and your team are losing, then you have to take some of the blame for this. This is the primary reason to pick Chewie on Galactic Assault. Moving away from villains, Chewie must always try to remain in close proximity to his team because of his many frailties. This means you are less likely to be overwhelmed and thus less likely to need to flee. It also means you will not be the only target for your enemies to consider. This is honestly so important if you want to stay alive as Chewie. Because of his Furious Bowcaster ability and his shot grenade, this makes Chewie particularly effective when attacking or defending choke points. I have had particular success with this on the second phase of Naboo, and as you can see from some of the footage, the first phase of Starkiller Base. Wait behind a corner with your team, then activate Furious Bowcaster, peek out quickly, fire as many shots as you dare before losing too much health, then get back behind cover. You should register lots of kills, especially if you are close enough to enemies. In situations like this, you may actually find it useful to throw a shot grenade at ordinary troopers, as this will paralyse large groups of attackers, potentially allowing you and your teammates to repel waves of aggressive players. Please don't be tempted to run down the choke point before activating a charge slam. You will look pretty cool, I suppose, but then you'll be dead. I mentioned earlier in the video that Chewie's gun can be fired in two different ways, and I almost always recommend that you hold down the aim button when firing the bowcaster. Firing in a horizontal spread does very small amounts of damage to players, and you won't register many kills this way. It could be useful at the choke points we just mentioned if you want to hit lots of enemies at once, but honestly, from my experience, it's much better to kill them off quickly, one by one. This reduces the amount of players firing at you and increases the likelihood that you will pick up more kills with Chewie. That's it for today's video, guys. If you have enjoyed it, please leave me a like and also subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content. Next week we'll be looking at how to play as Darth Vader. Don't forget to leave me a comment if you want me to focus on a particular hero.